You've ever found yourself chasing a woman who seems cold, distant, or completely uninterested? This video is going to open your eyes to something you've never considered. Because the truth is, it's not about convincing her, it's not about trying harder, and it's definitely not about begging for her attention. What you're about to learn is how to flip the script. Not with tricks, not with games, but with psychology, presence, and silence so powerful, it lingers long after you're gone. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take you through stories of real men who went from invisible to unforgettable. You'll discover why chasing kills attraction, why absence creates desire, and how to leave an imprint so strong that even a woman who didn't notice you at first won't be able to stop thinking about you. We'll uncover the psychology of longing, the secret power of contrast, and the one mindset shift that makes her wonder where you are, who you're with, and why she suddenly feels your absence. By the end of this video, you won't just know how to make a woman miss you. You'll know how to become the man she never forgets. You've probably been there before, staring at your phone, wondering why she hasn't replied, replaying every detail of your last conversation, analyzing every word, every pause, every little sigh she made. You think to yourself, did I say something wrong? Did I look too eager? Was I too available? And the deeper you go into that spiral, the more you convince yourself that maybe she was never interested in the first place. But let me ask you something. If she was truly never interested, why are you still on her mind enough that you can't let go? Why does her silence carry so much weight for you? Have you considered that maybe the issue isn't her lack of interest, but rather how you've positioned yourself in her story? Think back to the last time you lost something valuable. Something you didn't even realize you cared about until it was gone. It could have been a favorite watch, a lucky pen, or even a friend who drifted away. At first, you didn't notice. It didn't matter, but days later, weeks later, you began to feel that hole, that absence. It haunted you because you suddenly realized its importance only in the silence it left behind. The same principle applies with women. A woman doesn't miss you when you're always there, always available, always ready to chase her shadow. She begins to miss you in the gaps, in the space where your presence once was, but no longer is. And that's where the real power lies. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Daniel. Daniel was the kind of guy who thought effort was everything. He believed that if you gave a woman your full attention, bought her flowers, texted her every morning and every night, she would eventually see your value. He worked hard to convince her that he was worthy of her time, but here's what he didn't understand. Attention given too freely loses its value. The more he texted, the more he called, the more he hovered, the less she felt his absence. And without absence, there can be no longing. One day she stopped replying altogether and Daniel was left broken, wondering how his devotion had failed him. But the truth is, his devotion wasn't the problem, his timing, his self-respect, his strategy, that was what failed him. Now ask yourself this. When was the last time you pulled away and let her wonder where you've gone? When was the last time you created enough distance for her to feel the pull of your absence? Most men don't. They cling, they chase, they beg for attention. And what does that do? It kills attraction. Because the moment she knows you're always there, she never has to imagine life without you. She never has to question her feelings. She never has to miss you. But here's the part no one tells you. You don't make a woman miss you by playing games or manipulating her. You make her miss you by becoming someone worth missing. That's the truth. Let's go deeper. Imagine you walk into a bookstore and every single book is free. At first you're excited. You grab armfuls of books. But after a while, those books mean nothing because you didn't have to earn them. You didn't have to choose carefully. You didn't have to risk losing them. Now imagine walking into that same bookstore and seeing a rare, beautiful book locked in a glass case. Suddenly you crave it, you think about it, you wonder what's inside. That's the psychology of scarcity. And that's exactly how women's minds work when it comes to missing a man. The rarer you make your presence, the more valuable it becomes. Let's circle back to you. Right now, if you're chasing a woman who doesn't seem interested, you're giving away your value for free. You're handing it to her on a silver platter, and she doesn't even have to work for it. Ask yourself, why would she miss what she doesn't even need to reach for? The moment you stop handing it over, the moment you step back, is the moment she starts to notice the silence. Silence is powerful. Have you ever sat in a room after the music suddenly stopped? That stillness is deafening, almost unsettling, because it forces you to notice what you took for granted a second ago. That's how your absence should feel in her life. But let me share another story. There was a man named Arjun, confident, charismatic, but not in the way you'd expect. Arjun wasn't the loudest in the room. He didn't try to impress. He didn't beg for attention. What made him different was that he had his own life, his own rhythm. When he met a woman, he didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't feel the need to constantly check in. And yet, every woman he encountered seemed to circle back to him, curious, intrigued, even when at first they weren't interested. Why? Because he gave them space to feel his absence. He created a vacuum, and human psychology abhors a vacuum. When you leave space, the other person rushes to fill it with thoughts of you, questions about you, curiosity about what you're doing. That's the secret no one wants to admit. You don't need to force her to think about you. You simply need to step back far enough that her mind does it naturally. Now I want you to think about your own life. What are you filling with her absence right now? Are you scrolling through her social media? Are you wondering who she's with, who she's texting, why she hasn't noticed you? What if you flip that energy inward? What if instead of obsessing over her, you invested in becoming the man whose presence leaves a lasting mark? The kind of man whose silence speaks louder than anyone else's words. Wouldn't that make her wonder? Wouldn't that shift the power back into your hands? Remember this. You can't make her miss you by chasing her. You make her miss you by becoming unforgettable. And being unforgettable has nothing to do with constant attention. It has everything to do with the impression you leave when you're gone. Think of your favorite movie. You don't sit there rewatching it every second of every day, but even when it's over, certain scenes linger in your mind. They echo, they haunt you. That's the effect you need to create in her life. You need to become the scene she can't shake, the thought she can't silence, the presence she can't ignore even in your absence. But let's go deeper. Why is it that men struggle so much with pulling back? Why do you find yourself desperate to stay in her orbit even when she's clearly uninterested? The answer is simple but painful. You're afraid of being forgotten. You fear that if you step back, she'll move on. She'll never think of you again, and you'll fade into the background of her story. But here's the paradox. You only become unforgettable when you risk being forgotten. That's the irony most men never understand. Clinging ensures you'll be overlooked. Stepping back gives you the chance to be remembered. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a man who walks into her life and floods it with attention. Every day, every hour, his presence is there like background noise. She may tolerate it, she may even enjoy parts of it, but eventually it becomes like wallpaper. Unnoticed, unappreciated. Now imagine another man who enters her life with depth, with authenticity, with a spark that lingers, but then he steps away. He leaves her with questions, with memories, with echoes of his energy. Which man do you think she'll miss more? Which one do you think will haunt her thoughts when she's alone at night? Here's where I want you to dig into your own heart. Are you willing to let go of the need to be constantly present? Are you willing to let her experience the silence of your absence so she can feel the weight of what she's losing? Or will you cling to the illusion that chasing her will somehow make her see your worth? Because the truth is, men who are brave enough to step back are the men who end up being chased. They are the men who flip the dynamic, who turn disinterest into curiosity, curiosity into longing, longing into missing. That's the cycle, that's the psychology, that's the power you're ignoring. And so as we continue, I want you to keep asking yourself this question: what kind of man am I becoming? Am I the man whose presence suffocates, or am I the man whose absence intoxicates? Because the answer to that question determines not just whether she'll miss you, but whether she'll ever truly value you in the first place. There's a truth about human psychology that most men never realize. People don't miss what's present, they miss what's absent. The mind cannot crave what it already holds in abundance. It only begins to crave when something it once had suddenly slips away. And women, just like men, are wired to feel the pull of scarcity, the ache of distance, the curiosity that silence creates. Let me show you how this works. Imagine you hear a song for the first time. It strikes a chord deep inside you and you play it again and again. At first the melody excites you, every lyric resonates, but if you keep playing it nonstop, hour after hour, day after day, what happens? It becomes noise. You don't even notice it anymore. But then one day you stop. Days pass without that song, and suddenly it sneaks back into your mind. You find yourself humming it at random moments. You search for it again because the absence reminded you of what it gave you. This is psychology in action. The same principle applies when you want a woman to miss you. The brain works on what psychologists call contrast. Without darkness, light doesn't shine. Without hunger, food doesn't taste as sweet. Without absence, presence doesn't matter. And when you're always in her life, always at her fingertips, you rob her of contrast. You rob her of the space to feel your absence, and therefore she cannot miss you. That's why men who flood women with messages, attention, and availability actually push them further away. You think you're proving your worth, but what you're really doing is training her brain to see you as background noise. There was a man named Joseph who fell into this trap. He liked a woman named Emily, and every day he reached out. Text after text, call after call, compliment after compliment. At first she responded politely, but soon her replies grew shorter. She felt suffocated. Her brain had no room to feel curiosity, no chance to feel the pull of distance. When Joseph finally pulled back, something strange happened. Days later, Emily texted him first. She asked where he'd been, why he was so quiet, what changed. Psychology. His silence created contrast, and her mind rushed to fill the gap with thoughts of him. But there's another layer here, something called the Zeigarnik effect. In psychology, the Zeigarnik effect refers to the tendency of the human brain to remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. If a story ends cleanly, we move on. But if a story is interrupted, unresolved, it lingers in our mind like an open loop. That's why cliffhangers in movies keep you desperate for the next episode. And that's exactly how you need to show up in her life. Not as the man who hands over every thought, every detail, every moment of his time, but as the man who leaves something unsaid, something undone, something that makes her mind replay the interaction long after you're gone. Think about this. When was the last time you had a conversation with a woman where you didn't rush to fill the silence, where you left her with a question instead of an answer, a mystery instead of an explanation? Most men are terrified of leaving things unfinished because they crave validation. But the men who can walk away leaving her curious are the ones she can't forget. Her brain keeps replaying the open loop, and that's where missing begins. Let me tell you another story. There was a man named Kareem, soft-spoken, intelligent, and patient. When he met a woman he liked, he never tried to convince her of his worth. Instead, he shared just enough of himself to spark curiosity, and then he stepped back. He left conversations unfinished. He disappeared for days, not out of manipulation, but because he was deeply invested in his own life. And every single time, women circled back to him. They couldn't resist. Why? because he mastered psychological contrast and the Zeigarnik effect without even knowing it. He allowed their minds to chase him when his body wasn't around. Now let's go even deeper. Have you ever wondered why people always want what they can't have? It's called reactance, the psychological pushback that happens when someone feels their freedom is being limited. If a woman thinks she can have you anytime she wants, she doesn't value you, but the moment she senses she might lose access to you, her brain fights back. She feels a surge of desire, not because she suddenly discovered your worth, but because her freedom to choose you feels threatened. It's not about logic, it's about psychology. And men who understand this shift the entire dynamic of attraction. And mine was this: when I became, think about your own experiences. How many times have you wanted something more simply because it was out of reach? Maybe it was a job, a car, or even a friendship. The scarcity made it valuable. The distance made it desirable. Now ask yourself this: are you giving a woman so much of yourself that she doesn't have to fight for anything? Are you eliminating the psychological triggers that would make her miss you? Here's a painful truth: a woman will never miss a man who has nothing else going on in his life. If you're sitting by your phone waiting for her reply, you're not living, you're orbiting. And no one misses an orbit. But when you're out there building your body, your mind, your career, your passions, when you're pursuing something greater than her attention, she feels the loss of your presence because your energy is no longer centered on her. That's when she begins to ask herself questions. Where is he? Who is he with? What is he doing? That's when the missing begins. But let me ask you this: what kind of life are you building that she could possibly miss? Are you creating moments that leave an imprint, or are you blending into the crowd of men who all sound the same, act the same, and chase the same way? Because here's the psychology: people only miss what feels unique. If you're just another man begging for attention, there's nothing to miss. But if you're the man who leaves a distinct mark, whose silence feels heavier than another man's presence, then you become unforgettable. Picture this: two men walk into her life. The first man offers her everything up front: constant text, endless availability, predictable conversations. The second man offers her depth, but not all at once. He listens, he shares selectively, he leaves her curious, and then he pulls back. Psychologically, which man do you think she obsesses over? Which one does her brain replay at night when she's lying in bed staring at the ceiling? The answer is obvious: the man who left her with an open loop, the man whose absence created contrast, the man who triggered reactance by not being fully available. And yet most men are afraid to be that man because they fear losing her completely. But here's the paradox again: you don't lose her by stepping back, you lose her by never giving her the chance to feel your absence. The very thing you're terrified of is the only thing that creates the possibility of her missing you. That's psychology. That's human behavior. That's attraction at its core. So I want to ask you directly: are you willing to risk silence? Are you willing to leave her with curiosity instead of answers? Are you willing to step back and let the psychological forces of contrast, scarcity, and reactance do their work? Or will you keep chasing, keep flooding her life with your presence, and wonder why she never notices when you're gone? Because the truth is, every woman will miss a man who understands psychology, who knows how to leave an imprint, who becomes rare enough to be craved. And if you learn to do that, you'll discover that even a woman who seemed uninterested can suddenly find herself haunted by your absence, replaying your words, questioning her feelings, and realizing that she misses you more than she ever thought possible. I once knew a man named Ryan. Ryan was the type who gave everything too quickly. When he met a woman, he poured his heart out, cleared his schedule, and rearranged his world around her. At first, she enjoyed it. Who wouldn't? Free attention, endless validation. But over time, she grew cold. She stopped replying as fast. Her tone shifted. Her excuses piled up. Ryan panicked. He thought, if I just try harder, She'll come back. So he doubled his effort. Flowers, calls, long messages that poured out his heart. And you know what happened? She disappeared completely. The more he chased, the more invisible he became. Months later, Ryan was broken, sitting in silence, asking himself where he went wrong. But in that silence, he finally understood he hadn't given her the chance to miss him. He never gave her the gift of absence. Now contrast that with another man I knew, David. David wasn't the loudest guy, he wasn't the best looking, but he carried himself differently. When a woman began to pull away, he didn't chase, he didn't beg, he simply pulled back, not with anger, not with resentment, just with quiet self-respect. He focused on his work, his fitness, his circle of friends. Weeks later, the same woman who once seemed uninterested found herself reaching back out. Why? Because David left her with silence, and silence became unbearable. She realized she missed his presence, his energy, his steadiness. David didn't manipulate her. He didn't trick her. He simply created space for her to feel the difference between life with him and life without him. And then there was Omar. Omar fell deeply for a woman who never truly valued him. She liked his company, but never prioritized him. One day he made a choice. Instead of staying in her orbit, hoping she would see his worth, he disappeared. No long explanations, no drama, just gone. He invested in himself. He traveled, he learned new skills, he changed his body, his style, his life. Months later, she saw him again by accident. She couldn't believe the man standing in front of her was the same Omar she once ignored. And in that moment, she felt regret, deep and sharp. She missed what she thought she could always take for granted. Omar didn't do it to hurt her. He did it because he finally realized the power of absence. Here's the lesson these men teach us. Women don't miss men who are always begging for a place in their life. They miss the men who had the strength to walk away, the courage to invest in themselves, and the discipline to stay silent when everything inside of them wanted to scream for attention. I remember another story about a guy named Alex. Alex had been dating a woman casually, but she kept him at arm's length, never committing. One day he asked her where things were going. She brushed him off. Most men would have chased harder, tried to prove themselves, but Alex smiled and said nothing. He pulled away. Weeks later, she called him late at night. Her voice was soft, vulnerable. She admitted she missed him. Why? Because when Alex stepped back, he broke the cycle. He disrupted her comfort. She realized his presence mattered only after it was gone. That's not manipulation, that's psychology, that's reality. Now imagine this happening in your own life. Picture the woman you're chasing now, the one who seems disinterested. Imagine if you stopped chasing. Imagine if you let the silence do the work. Would she miss you? Maybe not immediately, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, the weight of your absence would grow. Because here's the truth. People rarely appreciate what's constant. They only realize its value when it's gone. And the men who understand this, who are willing to step away, are the men who live in her memory long after the others fade. There was a final story I want to leave you with. A man named Ethan loved a woman who didn't love him back. She saw him as a friend, nothing more. He tried everything, grand gestures, long talks, late night confessions, nothing worked. One day he decided he was done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. He focused on becoming the man he always wanted to be. Months later, she reached out. She said she missed him, that she realized no one else gave her the feeling he did. Ethan smiled, but he didn't run back, because by then, he learned the greatest lesson of all. The goal isn't just to make her miss you. The goal is to become a man who's so valuable, so unforgettable, that your absence is felt by everyone, not just one woman. So let me ask you now, are you living in such a way that if you stepped out of her life, she would feel it? Are you carrying yourself with enough weight, enough purpose, enough depth That your silence speaks louder than another man's presence, or are you just another voice in the crowd, easy to replace, easy to forget? Because here's the final truth. Making her miss you is not about her. It's about you. It's about who you become when you stop chasing, when you stop begging, when you stop handing over your worth. It's about becoming the man who doesn't need her to validate him, because he already validates himself. And when you do that, when you become that man, something magical happens. She will miss you. Even if she wasn't interested at first, even if she thought she could replace you, she will miss you, because deep down every woman longs for a man whose absence feels heavy, whose silence feels alive, whose presence lingers even when he's not around. And if you become that man, she won't just miss you, she'll regret ever letting you go.